Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Soraya Shaw has joined me in the studio today. Welcome, Soraya.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you very much for having me as well. It's very exciting.
So I've enjoyed our time in the green room, and I know that we're going to have a really enjoyable discussion today. Our audience knows that we always start to get to know our guest a little bit by you telling them about yourself and where your current focus is. So let's start.
Okay. So I'm actually an applied neuroscientist. I'm an executive coach, podcaster, author, speaker, and I've kind of reached this point in my life through various different stages and journeys as I've gone through. And the point that I'm at is very much around feeling that as humans, we're at this real apex of what's going to happen in the future. And therefore, what can I actually contribute to make it better for those people in the future with digital and AI and everything else that's going on?
This is going to be deep because I have that connection as well, as you know.
No, it is deep.
No, it's fascinating. I just love where you're coming from with that. And it's going to hit people sooner than I think they think. So I'm looking forward to exploring that with you. And then when you're not in this endeavor and working, we all need that space to go and do other things that aren't professional. So what do you do in your personal life?
Okay, so I adore my family. My family are very important to me. But I'm also very fortunate. I live down in Brighton in Kent. Not Kent, sorry, Sussex. And so there is so much to do down here. And so there's lots of art. So this weekend we're going off to see some bands play, going to the theatre. There's great restaurants, great bars, lots of brilliant people to be friends with. And so my life is very much out of the house, I would say, either with family or actually just going out having some fun.
Excellent. No, I'm the same as you. I've got a dog that gets me out of the house as well. And it's fantastic every time I go out for that 40-minute walk. So it's good.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
Okay, so let's take you back. So this is all about, obviously, the confessions of a successful leader. And you and I are successful leaders in our own right. And I have these labels that people say, oh, you're very successful in what you do. And we're going to unpick that a bit today. So let's go back to your childhood and for you to reminisce a little bit about what it was like and how did it inform your early leadership style?
It was a very interesting question to actually ask yourself, because my childhood was at the beginning, it was lovely and calm and, went to private school. Everything else was absolutely fantastic. Became an entrepreneur at the age of 6 when my dad was actually a dental surgeon. And I went and sold all his free moccasin products that he had to our neighbors. And I think I made about 6 pence or something. I don't know why I did it, because I didn't even know, I never needed money. I never thought about money. I don't know where I got the idea from. And when my father came home, he was so furious. He made me go back and take every single money back to the neighbors. So that was my first kind of experience of just doing something, just not waiting to ask permission and just going off and doing it. And then very sadly and very suddenly, he died when I was 15. And so our life literally changed overnight from being very comfortable to being very uncomfortable. And I ended up running his practice at, I think I was about 16, 17. I had no knowledge, no experience. I didn't know what I was doing. We had locums in who looked after all the patients. So the patients don't need to worry. I wasn't working on anybody at all. But I was meant to be running this practice and I knew nothing about it. So as you can imagine, at that young age, everything was a mistake, huge mistakes. And that kind of led me then into where do I go from here? I didn't go to university. I did, my A-levels in night school. But it did give me and it is what came out from thinking about it. And a friend said it to me the other day. He went, Soraya, you are so independent. And I'd never really thought about it before. But I think that sense of not having anything to hold on to or anyone to hold on to or any rules or regulations or ways you're brought up, because my father wasn't there and most of the time nor was my mother really, that actually we just had to survive. So hence I'm very, very close to my brothers. So family is very important to me, but also just this sense of just go out there and do it. And I say to my friends, I think I'm a bit thick because I've always done things because I've never really thought about them. And my younger brother is exactly the same as me, but we didn't really have any rules to follow. So we just did things.
And I really appreciate you sharing that. And obviously, it's a devastating event in anyone's life when it happens to you, in particular age that you're talking about. And I'm just curious, and I'm sure the audiences as well. It's almost like you use the word, I had to take on my father's practice. And I'm thinking, well, what other options were there at that point for something else to happen to the practice rather than you having to run it at that tender age?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really remember. This is a very interesting thing. Both my little brother and I, my elder brother was at school and he then went off to uni. But my little brother and I, there's only 18 months between us. And we can't actually remember. Your memory just shuts down quite naturally, shock, all fear, everything else that we know about. But I don't think the only option, well, there were options like selling the practice, bringing somebody else in to run it, but they just weren't on the table at that point. There was no option, really.
Wow. So massive learning curve at that young age.
Disaster, I'd call it. But yeah, learning how not to do it.
Firstly, the independent young woman, basically coming into the world at that point in terms of adulthood. So just talk to us about those next few years and what you were learning about yourself as a human being and as a leader.
What was I learning about myself? I don't think I ever saw it in that structured way. I think the way that we talk about development now and how our leadership and how we're growing up, there is a script for it now. There is an understanding of it. There is the theory and the evidence and everything else. Back then, you didn't really think about yourself in that sense. In one sense, you were brought up that if you did think about yourself, you're actually being very selfish. You should always be thinking about other people and how you can support other people. It's not just all about you. So I think what I learned was that led me into the future. I think I've always been extremely curious, and curiosity has really kept me as a really good friend throughout my life, actually, and wondering why people were doing things and what people were thinking and how people were making things happen and how you could do things differently. But I never at that age, I thought about them having any relevance to me. They were about other people. Me, I was just experiencing life, I suppose, and trying to work out who I was, where I wanted to go, all of those big questions that you have at that age, really.
Who did you have as role models around you at that point? Some people have many different ones, some people have few. What was happening for you at that point?
If I'm dead honest, I didn't have anybody. I never actually felt I had anyone to fall back on or lean to or talk to or any of those things. So I always found from a very young age, for some weird reason, I was always the person that people would come and talk to. I don't know why or how that happened or what I was saying. I have no clue whatsoever. So I never had a group around me that I could turn to, really.
Yeah.
Which would have been nice, but it didn't happen. And actually, maybe knowing me as well, and this goes right throughout my life, and it's something I'm much better at now. I wouldn't actually ever ask for help, because I wasn't used to getting help or knowing what help was or what difference it was going to make, because I only had me and probably my little brother to worry about. And that was it. That was my world, really.
Yeah. And of course, what you're describing, and we both know because we're in this field, is very, very common amongst many successful leaders who get to the top of their profession or their organizations or what they're doing as an entrepreneur, because they have that mindset of actually, I can do this myself, I'll find a way. And that serves us very well to a certain level and extent until we do need help around that. So talk to me a little bit more about your 20s and what were some of the defining moments there about how you then progressed from running that practice as a team.
Well, we sold it, thank goodness. You could only run it for 3 years. And so I then went to America for a little bit. I worked in London for a while, but I always wanted to get into TV. TV was like my big thing that I wanted to get into. And so I joined a video company in Soho, which was a wonderful experience. Great in those days. And then I managed to get my foot in the door to advertising, which is what I wanted to do, creative advertising, because I think that's one of the things I've learned about myself is I never thought of myself, but I'm actually a very creative person, but very different. I was so used to working with brilliant writers and directors and art directors and really clever people whose brains just work in a very mysterious way, but a genius way. And actually, so to get into creative advertising and to be in the making films, learning things all the time, because when I used to work on Unilever and Pittsburgh and all different brands, you're learning about things all the time, different people, how they do things, what they're making, how they make them, what strategy is, what planning is. Your brain is constantly just absorbing all this stuff, which is just absolutely brilliant. And I was lucky because I traveled a lot, and again, it comes back to when I was thinking about it, I never really had anyone to answer to. I had my clients, but I had good relationships with them. They trusted me. We worked very well together. But in terms of bosses, I was really kind of just left alone because it was my business and people seemed to think that I knew what I was doing. So just get on and do it. And I worked with some absolutely wonderful, wonderful people. So I learned so much from them. I can't even put my finger on the bits and pieces that I learned because ultimately they made me who I am now, or part of it made me who I am now. Yeah.
This may not be relevant, I don't know, but what I tend to find again in other people's journeys is particularly in the sort of 20s decades and what you're describing into the early 30s, when you've got this independence and don't have to answer to anybody apart from your clients, you're only as good as your last engagement with a client. There's sometimes this thing about when we do need then to engage somebody or get buy-in from somebody where we do need to influence them because they have authority, whatever it might be, we sometimes learn the hard way, because actually we're not sure how to do it. So was there ever a time for you then in that sort of decade where maybe you did need to start to answer to someone a bit more, get that buy-in, and it wasn't necessarily something that came naturally to you?
I don't know, because thinking about it, I had to get buy-in from the creatives. Obviously, I was going out and selling their work. That's really important for your clients and having that respect with your team and things like that. But I think one thing I've always been, and maybe it's something people just sense from me, and I hope they do, is I actually like people. I enjoy being with people. I enjoy having conversations with them, supporting them, talking to them like I'm talking to you. So I don't think I ever thought about it. I think people have just kind of seen me as me, and that might be right sometimes or it might be wrong sometimes. And I think you naturally just adapt. But I think because I'm just very honest, people know it. I
And
like
what
to think
challenges were
anyway.
you? No, exactly. And what challenge were you having with your team then? Because that's interesting. As we lead a team, and particularly in terms of the way that we grow up in terms of that independence, what challenges were you facing back then as you were less mature?
Probably it has to be around confidence and your own self-belief and self-awareness. You're not very self-aware at that age, and we weren't taught to be self-aware back, 20 years ago, whatever it was. So it was very much, and I was very lucky because I worked with brilliant people. It was only towards the end of my time in advertising did I come across some characters that I really wouldn't want to work with. But most of the time I was just very fortunate. I had great bosses, my guys who ran the agency. I didn't really have that many. There were females in the business, but it was a growing time then for women to be much more senior and have big roles. And I think that we were very good at relationships and very honest with each other. And this is probably not the right thing to say, but in those days, you'd all go out for a glass of wine after work. And so you shared so much of your stress, so much of your learning, so much what other people were going through. So it was your own kind of like mini school down in the wine bar, really, which I think taught, you absorbed so much from that was really, really important.
Yeah. And it's really interesting you say that, because there's a fantastic individual who's also been on this show called Sophie Bryan, and she specializes in sexual chemistry and taking that taboo subject into organizations to say, whether you like it or not, when basically men and women go down to the bar or the pub or actually in the workplace, there's something going on there which actually is positive from a creative perspective. It's not something that people are being overt about, and really exploring it, understanding it. And in a way, even though that's not what you were saying, those days where that's what we used to do and sort of just really shake off stuff was partly down to that, between those kind of interactions between groups of men and women. So it's fascinating how things change and how we should explore them maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a different set of rules then, and it was fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good fun.
Good. Well, that takes us up to, because you said obviously before you left the industry. So what was that turning point? What happened around then for you?
Life, I suppose, because my son then Freddie was, I think the crunch came with one morning. So he was about 7 or 8. And I was going to Milan, and I went into his room to say, darling, I'm off to Milan. I'll see you tonight. And Freddie just turned around and went, Milan, Milan, Milan. I hate Milan, and I'm never going to go to Milan. And that was like a wake up call. That was like, my goodness, I have to change something. I hadn't seen this coming. I hadn't seen this coming at all. And my husband's a great guy. He worked in the industry as well. So he kind of was always there to support me in different ways. And that's when I realized that I had to change something. And I had no energy, to be honest with you. I was just on my knees, absolutely on my knees, because you didn't say no. You just got on and you did things, and we never talked about stress. We never talked about resilience. We never talked about any of these things at all. You just thought it was your job to get it done and to make things happen and not let anybody down. Very simple. But what I was letting down was my whole family and myself and my son. And so that was the letdown, that I just wasn't seeing it.
So what did you do then?
What did I do? I actually decided I needed an exit strategy. Don't know how I worked that one out, but I did. And I had some good friends around me, actually girlfriends, as I'd gone to another agency and kind of got to know them. And Rich, my husband, was really supportive. One day I just left. Just said, I'm not doing it and I can't do it anymore. And I remember a friend of mine, she offered me a job at twice my salary if I came and worked in their agency. And I said no. And Rich was like, sorry, what did you say? And I went, yeah, I said no. I said, I just can't do it. I've got to draw a line under this. I need to do something different with my life. I can't do this anymore. I haven't got the strength for it. And I think a lot of people, we now know about burnout. In those days we didn't. But I think in a lot of industries, I think you reach a certain point when you've got children, you've got responsibilities, you've got past relationships that may have failed, new marriages, all the stuff that goes on in your life. And that just becomes a pinch point and that for me was a real pinch point.
So you were courageous and you made that leap.
Or stupid.
Well, I would say
one
courageous.
One or the other. You can look at it any way you want to. Yeah.
Yeah. And you created space for yourself. Then what did that enable you to do at that point?
Did I create space though? You see, I think I thought it would be great not to be working and to cook meals and do stuff. And it lasted there were so many different levels. I couldn't deal with it. I was used to earning my own salary. I was used to having a role. I was used to status. I was used to doing stuff, seeing people, finding, all of that world had changed. And I saw an ad, and this is going back, that said, train as a personal coach. And it was in the Times magazine. And it was at the time, it was called Results, the company then. And I just said, right, I'm going to go and do that. And Rich went, Soraya, what is it? And I went, I don't know, but I'm just going to do it. And that's been another thing in my life. I didn't really know what advertising was. I just knew I wanted to do it. I didn't really know what coaching was, but I just didn't want to do it. And so that's when that was my next chapter in my life. And it fitted perfectly because I had studied psychology. Advertising is all about psychology and people and what makes people tick and getting to the inside of humans and who we are. And so I thoroughly enjoyed that. I've worked with some amazing people, learned so much. All my leadership skills come from that, learning from other people, how they deal with things, how you share ideas, how you share stories, how you share where they can develop and grow, how you make people braver, not be so fearful, how you give them the confidence. All of those things is a wonderful toolbox, if you want, of helping you develop and become your older self or your more grown-up self.
I love that. And I'm sure people listening to this who are resonating with your story, whether they're in a corporate now and actually thinking about having a change in their life, whether that's in any of the helping professions or coaching in itself. And obviously, I've done this as well as you've done. Just talk about your own personal challenges in that transition, because certainly one of the things I felt was I had to be good at this in terms of coaching and helping other people because I had to get it right and to make sure they were getting value from me. And that's difficult when you're learning, isn't it, when you're first starting out?
I think so, but I think one of the greatest pieces of advice that I got from my training was, it's not your agenda, and don't carry anyone's monkeys on your shoulders. And I always remember that, and I still do. I keep those today. If I'm feeling any pressure that I need to find a solution for somebody, which, as you know, that's what you want to do, I will ask permission if I've got an idea or a thought that I think will actually help them. But otherwise they need those insights. But I think I don't know how you feel about this, but especially now with the neuroscience and being a neuroscientist and focusing on the brain, you learn so much more about what you can offer and what you can add. And just being able to have those different conversations with people. And that's why I think coaching now, for me anyway, is about it's a conversation. It's not a set of questions. It's a collaboration. It's a connection. It's a relationship. It's about creating that synergy between the two of you or the group or whatever you're with to actually come out with a solution that's going to be the best for everyone based on their life, their past, where they've come from, where they want to go to, all those kind of things.
And then I'm really interested now, because obviously then you went to train and obviously start working with this company that you'd applied for. And then at some point you decided you wanted some independence or do things different on this breadth of experience you've got now that said in terms of what you do with the podcast. So just talk to us about that point and how that came about. What was the catalyst for that?
When I retrained, I ran my own company. I've never worked for anybody. Again, I think that's the kind of pattern throughout my whole life.
Yeah.
That's my independent streak. And I've worked with lots of lovely clients, but it's a different sort of relationship. And that suits me really, really well. And so the chance to retrain was, I got to a point where if I was bored, actually, I kind of done it for a long time. And I was thinking, I need to do something more than this. This must be more that I can add. And at the time I was working on a working parent strategy for the advertising industry, marketing industry. And also well-being was just coming in. So a big, big strategy on well-being and what well-being actually meant. So I was doing very little coaching at that time and much more consultative work, if you want. And I did a course, the Association for Coaching, with Professor Paul Brown. He was doing a course on the brain. And I just love the brain because my training with results was all about brain-based as well. So it's always been a reoccurring theme. And then he said at the end of it, and you can do this master's, this MSc in applied organizational neuroscience. And it was just like another eureka moment. It was like, oh, I'm going to go and do that. That's what I want to do. I'm going to do that, even though I really didn't have the intelligence or anything else to do it. It was just another jump. And so that's what I did for 3 years, trained, worked, did it part-time, worked, trained, met some brilliant people who I'm still in touch with. And we've got this lovely little cohort of who we are. Very sadly, Paul died last year, which was is actually a big gap in my life, because you asked me before as I'd had a mentor, and I'd never had a mentor apart from when I met him. And then that completely changed everything. And doing the masters it was again very new in the UK, very like coaching. It was kind of like, what is this thing? And typical me, I didn't really know how to understand it or explain it or what I was doing, but I was just fascinated by it. And so it was the most wonderful thing I've done, but also the hardest thing I've ever done. It was a completely different language, completely different. Yeah, just completely, completely different, but hugely, hugely rewarding. And I'm just so pleased that was the gap that was missing for me. There was something I needed to build everything on. And we're human, and we're sitting at this kind of crossroads right now of, are we going to go digital, AI, all the other bits and pieces? And how do we keep our humanity? How do we get people to keep developing creatively, innovatively, use their critical thinking? And especially when all those skills, a lot of people are frightened of them because they're like, oh, I'm not creative. Don't be so stupid. I can't do that. And actually, people just don't realize that creativity is so simple and it's innate in all of us. But it's so important for our futures as humanity, I think, and as people. And so that's what really fires me up. That's what I want to communicate with people and get people to have that confidence and that awareness and that self-belief that they can go off and develop new things, develop new ideas, new products, new ways of looking at things. Like how medicine's changing, how, where is this collaboration that needs or must be going on and is going on. That's what actually excites me for the future, because I have a little grandson now. He's 14 months. So if you want a new mission, the mission is, how do we leave the world for him? That's my kind of mission.
that. So I've got a couple of questions I want to link together now, and brings into maybe some of the deeper areas which our audience might be interested in. So it's really interesting what you said. Let's take you in your 20s and 30s, and this first independent woman who was very good at serving clients, didn't really need too much help, and knew how to influence people and certainly didn't ask for help. And then you're in this role now, as I am, when we're here to help people to make a difference in how they show up in the world, and yet they may not even know they need help. Or so I just talked about the challenge of that in the business that you own, the way that you're obviously developing your practice and the way you make a difference, where there are so many influencers leaders out there that don't even necessarily recognize they need the help.
That's a really good question. It's a very interesting question, because I think there's two answers to it. First of all, we talk, as a society, we talk about this stuff now. So actually most leaders know that they can't stop learning. If they stop learning, they're sunk, quite frankly. It's the best way I can put it. So I think those kind of conversations I've noticed over the past, since COVID really, take on a very different way. You can have those conversations. It's not woo anymore. It's not fluffy. It's, no, I'm a leader and I have to develop. I need to grow. I need to recognize my gaps and what I need to do. But with the brain stuff, that has been a real challenge, because people didn't get it. They didn't understand it. It's very new. Now everybody's saying they do brain. And what I find interesting is I've made a conscious choice that if people don't want to work with me and they don't want to learn it, I'm not going to bother, because there's too many other people out there who genuinely want to learn it, to make a difference to their organizations, to make them more sustainable, to look after the brain health of the people who work for them. Brain capital is a thing that we need to be talking about for our humanity. And so there are lots of people out there who want it. It's how you reach them that is the hardest thing. And that's always been the hardest thing. But I think if people aren't curious and they don't want to learn, they're probably not my kind of people. And I'm just being dead honest about that, really. But I think we are lucky that we're living in a world where people talk about and share and open and are honest and understand what authenticity is, and all those words that look very nice on a values sheet, as part of our values as an organization. People now realize that actually there's a way to live them.
And I just wonder, obviously you're more experienced than I am in neuroscience. I'm really more of an amateur who learns from the sides and takes bits I want to tape. I was really recently reading again Carl Rogers on becoming a person. And even though that was written in the 1950s, he was very, very astute about how another human being, being present with another human being and accepting them for who they are, allowing then that individual through their brain to then move on through change. And yet so many coaches now that are out there are being more mentor coaches, as you say, giving the solution to people, because that's what a lot of them want. I just wonder what your view is on that and where that has its place now in terms of neuroscience as well.
You see, I think there's been a huge explosion in coaching, rightly and wrongly, to be honest with you. There's a lot of money being made from it. And I think there are quite a few people who have gone into it believing that it's about telling, as opposed to about giving insights and sharing and helping that other person develop and listening to them. So I think I can understand why more of them are mentors. And a lot of clients want a mentor. They don't want somebody unpeeling the onion or, taking the skin off. They don't want that. They just want, look, my life is so complicated. As I say to people, we're living in a tumble dryer, quite frankly. People want answers. People want help. We've got mental well-being, which is, again, is all these different areas that we now talk about and are kind of out there, wherever they're coming from. But I think that if someone needs a mentor, and you'll find that a lot of people who've worked in banking or different areas, so they'll work and stay within that industry. I'm lucky because I work across all different kinds of industries. And then I think people are getting those answers that they need. I don't think it's right or wrong. I just think, part of our role is to support other people. And if that's what it takes, without shoving it down people's throats, then I think that's okay.
Some other insight from you, which I'm gaining from the market at the moment, I'd be interested to get your view. And it links to your grandson. Is it your grandson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little Rafi. Yeah.
Yeah, little Rafi. So you said earlier it's about, focus on what is it we need to do around the world to obviously enhance his life and make sure that he has a life in the future that is worth living and feeling fulfilled. And I'm just wondering what role we as a generation have to play in this, because I'm feeling a lot more resentment out there now, particularly in leaders in their 40s and 50s, about this new generation coming through who actually are expecting something for nothing. They don't need to do the things we've done and make the same. What do you think that we as a generation have to do to enable the new generation?
That is such a good question, because on Friday I was at King's College London as a tutor to their MSc HR group with a wonderful friend of mine, Jason. He's a kind of global HR director, and he was talking about Gen Z. Now, I think all the generations anyway were invented by advertising agencies for campaigns, and it's good planning and all that kind of stuff. I mean, but there is a truth in the different ways that we've experienced the world, and we're coming through it. And he was talking about Gen Z and exactly what you were saying, that, they're a very difficult group to work with, blah, 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 blah. That's what we were talking about. And I kind of said, well, yeah, I get that. Part of me was sort of like, part of me is frustrated because I'm like, you're in danger of getting cancelled out as a generation, and that's just going to be a tragedy, an absolute tragedy. You've got alphas coming up behind you who are really raring to go and all this kind of stuff. We're having this debate. And then there was a girl at the front, and she pulled me up really quickly because she said, but don't you think it's true that every generation will moan about the other generation? And I just looked and I went, God, you are so right. We got caught up in this dialogue of this news that we read, or the people we're talking to, or the things that we hear, and we don't actually question the legitimacy of them in a way. And actually, they're probably quite right. And, why should they be working 24/7? I work with so many people who are saying, that especially the whole going back into the office thing now. I don't want to go back 4 days a week. I can't do that. I've got a life outside now, and I love my work, but I've got to find a balance. Well, actually, they're right. So I think there's more really important conversations that we need to have, especially if you look at diversity, across the age groups. Is it the first workforce with all 5 different ages in them?
Right.
I mean, that's massive. So it's not just one generation that should have a focus on them, because, the older generation have got so much wisdom to bring and relationships to build. So I think there's got to be a better dialogue. We've got to stop doing this silly, oh, when I was your age, I did, whatever. And maybe I don't feel it so strongly because I didn't do the normal thing when I was their age, But I do think that there's so much wonderful, brilliant brains out there, their generation, my generation, your generation, my son's generation, that it's got so much to contribute and add. And that's what we should be doing.
Love that. So I've got one final question for you.
Okay.
So bear in mind what you've done already, and it's lovely to hear your story and what you're doing now. You're in a very interesting area where you can make such an impact in the world. What is it that's going to be your legacy if you live the dream that you want to do and what you want to create with why you're here now for how many years we're graced to be here? What is it that's left for you to do?
Okay, so we have a podcast as well, Brainy Podcast, which I absolutely love, which I do with my colleague Tracy Filler. And we've had some brilliant guests like you. And it's all about the focus on how to get people learning from other people about how they could be more innovative, creative, critical thinking, and use their brains. Because the mission is we want everyone to bring all their brains to work, which currently they're not at all. So that's one legacy. And I'm a bit greedy because I've always been a bit like that. The other one is there's a book that I need to write. I've edited some chapters, but I'd like to do that. And the other thing I want to do is I'm not called Grandma, I'm called Ray Ray. My son asked me to be that, and I'm like, cool, that's fine. I just want to leave a good legacy with my family, that when I do go off to the skies, they go, oh, Ray Ray was good fun. Ray Ray taught me a lot. Ray, they've got that lovely warmth and love that they remember, and that they will then pass on to their children and their friends and their generations. And I think that's a massive legacy. If I achieve that, I'll be very happy.
Absolutely. Well, I love the passion and energy, and obviously we're in similar fields, and I've really enjoyed finding out about your story today. So, Soraya, thank you very much for being on the show.
No, Andrew, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.